I don't know. It's warmer in here than it is outside.
I turned it up to 72.
Someone's over there at the door. Gino's here. Okay, here we are. Starting on time for Yismach.
On top of Yismach.
Megillah Daf Chav Dalet.
That's an oxymoron.
Lamed Dalet Megillah.
So excited, huh?
Me? Not really yet. What page is that?
No, we're on the fourth. Okay. Started again.
We're having.
Yeah, you back? You can see us? Okay. I don't know what happened. All right, here we are. Okay, let's try this again. So I just wanted to say, I think we're going to end up having close to 20 tonight. So mitzvah,
Wow.
very geschmack. And if anyone hasn't yet had a chance to prepay by quick paying or somehow sending the shul, I think we agreed on $50. That's what it sort of managed.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, it averaged out to be about 50, including tip last time. So we could all just make sure the shul doesn't have.
Wait, what's the for you?
No, don't pay.
Wait, did you put the
I put the information in the main chat, not the Daf Yomi
You
chat.
never got back to me if we take crypto.
We take crypto. I'll take crypto. I'll take a
But you can't pay
couple.
with-
I'll take a couple of Bitcoin.
We can't pay with crypto.
Okay, so we're going to pick up from the Gemara today. We're holding on Daf Gimel Amud Beis. It was in the middle of an idea that we were finished up with yesterday. We'll finish that off quickly, and then we'll talk through a little bit of new ideas. We're going to get back to Hilchos Chalam Lev. So if everyone remembers, and if you don't remember, I'll just give you a quick reminder. Yesterday we had been discussing Shvius. And in that discussion on Amud Beis, we had a conversation about Tosefes Shvius. The same way we have a concept of Tosefes Shabbos and Tosefes Yontif, that a person's supposed to take in the Kedusha of Shabbos a little earlier and let it go a little bit later after Shabbos. So too, there's a concept of Tosefes Shvius, that the same way there is an Isser is a prohibition to work the land during the year of the 7th year of the Shemitah cycle, the Shvius year. So too, one should be Mosif a little bit beforehand and add on a little after. So the types of shvius that we had discussed in the Gemara, it seemed the Gemara wanted to say, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai had said that you should start it already from Pesach and Shavuos before. And the Gemara explained that was a takana that they had made, and Rabbi Gamliel had come and been mevatel that takana. The Gemara had been bothered. 1 second, it's not a takana, it's Allah al Moshe Sinai, the Gemara said. And the Gemara proved that it was Allah al Moshe Sinai. It mentioned the statement where there's Allah al Moshe Sinai of Eser Netios, which were 10 young saplings that are grown in a large area called the Beis Sah. And the Halach Moshe Sinai was teaching us that one is allowed to work the land in that Beis Sah all the way up until Rosh Hashanah, meaning there's no Tosefes Shvius there. The implication being that if it's not that specific scenario, all other types of work in the land would be usher as a Halach Moshe Sinai. And a Halach Moshe Sinai is the exact same thing as Xeris HaKasav, but it really does have a very similar level of.
We don't know.
The lumdus of Esenetius is Halach Moshe Sinai.
I don't know the lumdus.
Well, probably because
No, it's just young trees.
Survive.
There is an argument there. The young trees, they need a little bit more work, otherwise they're not going to survive. But normally, if it's an Issa Deraisa, we wouldn't say, well, hey, listen, I really want to be able to go to workshop this morning, so I think I'm going to do it. We don't do that. You have to have so there's a special Halach Moshe Sinai, which means to say that you can't tell me that Rabbi Gamliel's Bezdin came and said, hey, we decided we wanted to do away with the the Isser of Tosa Shvias because they decided you can't do that. It's halacha Moshe Sinai, no matter how chashuv you are, it doesn't matter. So the Gemara explained that no, the halacha Moshe Sinai was only teaching me 30 days. The 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, within those first 30 days, the immediate preceding 30 days, there's an Isser of Tosa Shvias, and that'll have a status of a halacha Moshe Sinai. Came along Bezdin Shbasham Beis Hillel, and they added on top of that from Pesach and Shavuos, and when they did, they added it on with a condition, which said if a Bezdin later on feels that this is too much, they built in a back door to sort of cancel the decree, and therefore, when the Bezdin of Rabban Gamliel came along, they went ahead and did that, and that's what the Gemara had said yesterday at the end of the Gemara, what was going on. Now, that was one answer as to explain this whole concept of Rabban Gamliel did. We're going to see today two more explanations of what Rabban Gamliel did when he canceled it, and depending upon which one you go, we're going to have I'll tell the halacha when we get to the end. So the first answer, which we finished with yesterday, was that the Iker Tosa Shvias is a halacha Moshe Sinai, and Bezdin Shel Beisham Beis Hillel added on before that from Pesach and Shavuos. Ask the Gemara. We're holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom of the Gemara. 5 lines from the bottom of the Gemara. First word on the line, V'hani Hilchos Ani. 3B, I don't know.
Bottom of 3B2.
No clue.
Last line, 3B2.
Okay. V'hani Hilchos Aninu. You just told me this whole cheshbon that I just explained is predicated on it being halacha Moshe Sinai. That can't be. Kra Ninhu. Meaning what? Meaning it's actual psukim, meaning not a halacha Moshe Sinai, which is a very fancy, crafty way of telling me what Hashem wants. But sometimes you could just darshan it from psukim, right? So what would be the gzeira? What would be the understanding of the gzeira sakasiv? Pasuk says, and this pasuk is actually written by Shabbos, and in that pasuk by Shabbos it says the following: Sheishes yomim ta'avoid, you work for 6 days, u'v'yom hashvi tishbais, and on the 7th day you shall rest, meaning no work. B'chorish u'b'katzir, from plowing and from harvesting, tishbais you shall rest. So it doesn't make sense to say, and this is the opinion we'll see in a moment of Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't make sense to say that in that pasuk talking about Shabbos that it went ahaid and repeated the words b'charush v'katzir tishbos to tell me that plowing and harvesting are usher. Once you tell me sheishes yomim tavod uv'yom hashvi tishbos is a generic statement, it includes everything. You don't have to add anything else in. So therefore, it can't be talking about Shabbos. We're going to see that Rabbi Akiva understands it's talking about Shvius. And it's going to be teaching me the following halacha. B'charush v'katzir tishbos, says the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva Omer, ein sarich loymar charush v'katzir shel shvius. He says it's clearly talking about shvius, but it can't be talking about telling me the isser on shvius itself. Shaharei kvar nemar, because that I already know from another pasuk. The pasuk we saw yesterday. Sod chalei sizar, the karm chalei sizmar, and the pasuk continues and talks about, and this is the point here. The Gemara leaves out the most important part. The part is the next pasuk talks about kitzircha. Right, since the pasuk is mefurish that it's talking about kitzircha, Tosa speaks out over here in what I just said in the last Tosa on Daf. Right, that pasuk says kitzircha, even though it doesn't say chorish. But once you have the two going together, and I don't need to say kitzircha, if I don't need to say kitzircha, that kitzircha must be coming to tell me something else. It must be coming to tell me that the kitzircha and the plowing and the harvesting of that pasuk, which is talking about shvius, isn't talking about shvius itself, meaning during the year. Elo charish shel erev shvius. The charish is referring to the Tosa Shvius before, shenichnas l'shvius, that comes into Shvius, turning to the top of Daf Dalet Amud Aleph, v'katzir shel Shvius, sheyatzel l'mitzvah Shvius. Rather, Rabbi Akiva understands that from this pasuk, we learn a gzeira sakasiv dikadin. It's mefurish in the Kra, according to Rabbi Akiva, that the pasuk is to be understood, teaching me the din of Tosa Shvius, that there's a problem of doing charisha before, and there's a problem of doing kitzira after. Hold on one second. What does that mean? That means that it's not a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's a gzeira sakasiv, and therefore, and this is the way you'd explain it, it must be that the halacha l'Moshe Sinai was telling me even beyond the 30 days, right? We're not saying that there is no halacha Moshe Sinai, but rather that halacha Moshe Sinai, which we're telling you, you're allowed to go ahead and work the Eser Netios. The implication then is that all other things you can't do. Well, I don't need a halacha Moshe Sinai to teach me that it's also for those 30 days, because Rabbi Akiva already learns it from a pasuk. If he already learns it from a pasuk, Elamai, what is that halacha Moshe Sinai teaching me? It's teaching me even earlier. Meaning what? What we think Beis Shammai Beis Hillel's takana is, that Rabbi Gamliel came and fixed, really is a halacha Moshe Sinai, and Rabbi Gamliel had no business being fixing that by being mevatel it. Why? Because you can't be mevatel halacha Moshe Sinai. That's how the Gemara, that's how the Rishonim speak out this question. It's not just simply saying a technicality. Oh, you telling me it's halacha Moshe Sinai? No, it's a pasuk. But rather, by telling me that it's a pasuk, I now have another halach. We're not saying that the halach Moshe Misina no longer exists. What we're saying is it must be that it was said on an even earlier time, which means Taisa Shvius Min HaTorah will go even earlier. In which case, then, that's the question of the Gemara. It's a bomb kasha. Meaning, how can the Gamaliel? That's what the Gemara is asking. The Gemara is literally asking, how can the Gamaliel come and tell me that I'm mevatel a takana, which is halach Moshe Misina? The Gemara's answer 2 seconds ago was that what was he mevatel before 30 days? After 30 days, he never touched. What do you mean? Before 30 days is also also because of halach Moshe Misina, according to the Gemara now.
I just think, well, what can you say like you said yesterday? It's to add a nasay on Shvius.
So that would work if all it was doing would be. Okay, no, it's a fair point. Meaning, if all it is just coming to tell me the Isser Asay on Shvius.
There's an extra assay like you said yesterday.
Right. And the question is even a little bit stronger because Tosfos over here says that we'll see in a moment. Rabbi Shmuel is going to say that it's talking about Shabbos. Rabbi Shmuel says this pasuk is talking about Shabbos. He says B'charish v'katzer tishbais is teaching me a special halacha, a kula. Well, let's read it inside and maybe we'll flesh it out. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, no, he argues with Rabbi Akiva.
That's how much it is.
Yeah, he says ma charish rishus af katzir rishus, meaning just like there's no such thing as a harisha that's a mitzvah. You can't find anywhere in the Torah where chorish, plowing, there's no plowing of mitzvahs. However, there are katzir, there is harvesting of mitzvahs. When is that? The katzir sa'aymer. When right, we know there's a carbon aymer we need to bring on the second day of Pesach. So if it should turn out that Shabbos is going to be the time when you'd have a chiyuv to go ahead and harvest the specific barley needed for the omer carbon, you're allowed to do it. And that's what Rabbi Shmuel understands the pasuk is teaching me. It's a kula. Ma charish rishus av katzer rishus, which tells me that the pasuk is telling me what should you not do? Only those two things which are rishus. However, yatsa katzir ha'aymer shehi mitzvah. Meaning, so again, let's just speak it out. Rabbi Akiva understands the pasuk clearly must be talking about Shvius, and Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Shmuel says it's talking about Shabbos. Now, why do they each choose to assume the way they do? I mean, the pasuk is clearly talking contextually about Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't make sense to be talking about Shabbos, therefore I'm going to teach it for something else. Rabbi Shmuel says no. Rabbi Shmuel says it's talking about Shabbos, I'm going to keep it talking about Shabbos. What's their argument? So the way Tosfos speaks it out, very interesting idea, is he says it's very simple. The context of the pasuk is it's clearly talking about telling you not to do something. It's not coming to tell you a kula. It's coming to tell you a chumrah. It's coming to say, charis or kasher tishbais, don't do something. So Rabbi Akiva says, I need to keep this as a don't do something. Rabbi Shmuel says, doesn't necessarily mean that. Once you're telling me that it's not needed, I'm going to darshan it however I want. So Rabbi Shmuel says, if I have to choose between sort of, slipping in an idea that it's talking about a kula, but keeping it about Shabbos, I'd rather do that than make it talking about Shvius, which it's not at all talking about, in order to keep it talking about a prohibition. So Rabbi Akiva says it's talking about Shvius and it's a prohibition. Therefore, what is it saying? It's saying you're not allowed to do Taisa Shvius. And Rabbi Shmuel says, no, it's talking about Shabbos, which means it's a kula telling me that you're allowed to do Kitzira on Shabbos if that Kitzira is L'tzarech HaMitzvah. So I'm just pointing out that your question is a little bit stronger now, because if Rabbi Akiva's whole svara, according to Tosfos, is that we want to maintain consistency in the pasuk, that it's telling me not to do something, then even stronger the question might be, why not just say that it's Leiser Essay? I don't have a good answer to that. It's a good question. I thought what I had said yesterday was much better than my okay. But the point of the Gemara is, it's a kasha. What's the question? The question comes from the fact that Rabbi Akiva, who learns it out from Xeris HaKasav, how can Rabbi Gamliel go ahead and be mevatel the din if it's Allah Moshe Misina? And I'll just point out here, and it's an important idea to know, there is a very interesting sheet of the Rambam. The Rambam says that although halacha Moshe Misina in many ways is Xeris HaKasav, or it's not Xeris HaKasav, but it has a status of a din Torah, then one specific area halacha Moshe Misina does not have that. And he says that when it comes to the din of Suffolk, we treat it like a divrei sofrim, which is remekel, which means there is a halachic nafkamina between saying something is Xeris HaKasav or saying something is halacha Moshe Misina. Halacha Moshe Misina does not rise to the level of being like a Xeris HaKasav. It's a giloy of what Hashem wants, but then again, so is it the Rabbanon to a certain extent, and it's an asmach the Ba'alma. On any level, there is a giloy of what Hashem wants. So the question over here is, that's true, and that might knock it down even a farther madrega. You're not following the sprach.
Allah Moshe Sinai means God gave it. That's not as strong as something that said in the Torah.
That's what I'm discussing now. It's an in-between. It's an in-between. Meaning, in some sense, it's a din Torah. In some sense, it's min haTorah.
How could you say it's the Rabbana?
Well, what does it mean when we say something's min haTorah? right? Something's min Torah means
From
it's
the
written.
Torah.
It's written in the Torah.
Written.
So where's the halacha Moshe Sinai written in the Torah? It's not. It's the Masorah. It's
Right.
tradition, right? So that tradition, does that fall into the same category as the rabbis making a new halacha sometime later, or does that fall into the same category as if it's written in the Torah? So there's this quasi status, right?
Right.
So this quasi status, the Rambam explains the major consequence, the difference between which bucket you stick it in is what's going to be the halacha if I have a suffix. Normally we say when there's a suffix and it's a din Torah or machmir, right? If you're not sure if you benched or not, benching is min ha-Torah, so we say bench again. Suffix, we go l'chumrah, do it again. But if you're not sure if, I don't know, for instance, you said a bracha before eating something, which is only midrabanan, then we say, don't do it. Why? Because it's only derabanan. And it's derabanan. When you have a doubt, we say to go l'kula, and don't say it, because maybe you'll say Hashem.
Being that Hashem spoke to Moshe directly, isn't it?
So that rises above a regular normal derabanan, but the question is, does it rise to that same level of a deraisa where we say you have to be machmas? The Rambam takes a stance on this, and he says no. Misafek or mekel by halacha Moshe Misina, which would mean that in our Gemara, at this point of the Gemara, what the Gemara seems to be saying is that Rabbi Akiva holds that the reason why Taisa Shvius exists is from a Xeris HaKasav, which would mean if you have a suffix, you'd be Machmir. And Rabbi Shmuel, it would seem, would hold that it would be Halacha Moshe Misina. Or Rabbi Akiva himself would say that the 30 days prior to Shvius, the year, Rosh Hashanah, those 30 days are Min HaTorah, and the days before that are Halacha Moshe Misina. But the point of the Gemara is that how can Rabbi Gamliel wouldn't be able to be Mavatal either one. If it was a din derabanan, a regular normal din derabanan of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, then it seems he could have, only because Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had put in this condition where there was a provision in their decree that said that a later bezdin, even not as big, not as smart, could do it. But if it's a halacha Moshe Misinai, then on that, so I'm pointing out that you can have something like a halacha Moshe Misinai that can have elements of being a derabanan, meaning if it's a suffix, if it's a doubt, you should be makel. But it has elements of minat Torah because you see over here that a bezdin couldn't just go ahead and say, hey, you know what, I want to be mevatlet because it has this higher, stronger level. So that's exactly what the Gemara is bothered by now. How can Rabbi Gamliel go ahead and be mevatlet that decree?
Kevin, where does the Rambam say that?
I'm not 100% sure he says it. If I had to guess, I would have to say it's in the Hakdama to the Mishnayos, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
If you find out the source, I'm interested.
Yeah, I'll look it up right after.
Okay.
I thought it was,
No, what's interesting is that the Rambam understands. Really, it gets interesting is that the Rambam has a unique shita when it comes to suffix deraisa, right? And this is. Yeah, it's discussed. Yeah, so I don't want to complicate matters, but the honest truth is, if you really want to,
I thought it was director. That halacha Moshe Misina.
It is deraisa, but it doesn't have the same level of Xeris HaKasav. Since it doesn't have the same level of Xeris HaKasav, therefore it's going to be.
What's Xeris HaKasav?
Xeris HaKasav be written in the Torah.
So we do consider it director.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
One thing that you'll find as you learn more and more is that it's fun to think about things in a binary sense of asr, mutter, tahor, tameh, but oftentimes there's always more than two sides to a question. The famous brisker mahalach is that there's a chakira. It's like this or it's like that. But who says it can't be this or that? What about this, that, or that?
I like binary.
Binary is easy. It makes life simple. But the reality is the world we live
Nothing in the
is not binary. No.
Especially
Okay.
now, nothing's binary.
Not that's binary. Oh yeah, that's. yeah.
It's a good thing no one listens to the Daf Yomi Shiurim on YouTube. Otherwise, we might get in trouble for our politically incorrect statements. But okay. So the Gemara is holding back a question. How can Rabbi Gamliel go ahead and be mevatel the decree if it's halacha Moshe Misinai? So the Gemara answers, no. Let's clarify. Ela Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak ki gemiri hilchasel lemishra yalda. No. When we had this halacha Moshe Misinai, the halacha Moshe Misinai didn't expressly say you can't do Taisa Shvius. It said you can do plowing on a field that has 10 saplings in order so that it shouldn't die during Shvius. And we extrapolated from there, if that's mutter, it must be everything else is also. Cry lemesar's kana. The pasuk. So meaning what? Allah Moshe Misina was telling me only the heter, the permission, but the isser that's min haTorah. That's what the Gemara wants to say, which is a very really dochak answer.
Not up to paint the picture.
Right, meaning really it's only within those first 30 days, and Rabbi Gamliel fixed it prior to 30 days. The Gemara is bothered. The kiva the hilchasa lemishra yalda. Once you have me a halacha Moshe Misina telling me the 10 saplings I'm allowed to work, don't I extrapolate just logically from there? Lav memela zakena asira. Isn't it not clear to me that I'll automatically know that? And this, by the way, is the point of that I'm mentioning from the Rambam gets a little bit stronger, right? Meaning, this question isn't just a question on the Gemara. The question would be that it matters that there's a difference between whether we say it's Allah Moshe Sinai or it's a din deraisa, because like I said, they're like the Rambam, it's a din derabanan, and therefore you'd be suffik lekula, where if it's deraisa, it's lechura. Just pointing out that there's an added strength to the question. So the Gemara says, Enechanami, you're right. Ella hilchas Rabbi Yishmael, kroy Rabbi Akiva. We go back to sort of what I said earlier, meaning what the Gemara means to say is that there's a machlekes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. Where do we learn the din of Taisa Shvius out from? Rabbi Akiva clearly learns it from a pasuk because he understands the pasuk to be talking about Shvius, not Shabbos. Rabbi Yishmael says the pasuk is not talking about Shvius; it's talking about Shabbos, and it's talking about whether one is allowed to do the Ketziras HaOmer on Shabbos. Therefore, he doesn't have a pasuk; he needs the halach l'Moshe Misina. Which means Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, it seems on the surface, are arguing over whether there is even a halacha Moshe Misina by Taisa Shvius. That's one possibility, although that's a little bit difficult because the general assumption is that there really is no such thing as a machlekes and halacha Moshe Misina. Halacha Moshe Misina is not like a Gzeira Shava or a way you darshan a pasuk. That's something that we have in Masorah. It's very difficult to say that there's a machlekes and halacha Moshe Misina. So Rishonim speak out over here that what it really means is that everyone's masking that there's a halacha Moshe Misina teaching me an Isser Shvius. It's just that the Isser, and not only that, well, okay, the first half I'll say, that everyone agrees there is a halacha Moshe Misina. The question is, what's included in the halacha Moshe Misina? Meaning, is the halacha Moshe Misina teaching me everything, the entire Isser? Is it only teaching me portions of the Isser? So they come up with ways off the daf to sort of put that idea together. But the point of the Gemara is, what we need to know is that whether you're talking about Rabbi Yishmael or you're talking about Rabbi Akiva, the din Torah, whether it's an actual din Torah or it's this quasi halacha Moshe Misina din Torah, they'll both agree that it only goes from 30 days before Rosh Hashanah starts, and everyone will then agree that the din of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel was answering everything before those 30 days, and that is the point where it came along Rabbi Gamliel's Bezdin and it was Mavatal. Okay.
So Moshe learns the same thing as whatever's in the written Torah.
Well, it's telling us the same halacha. Yes. Now there will be if what I'm quoting from the Rambam is accurate and true, it'll come out that according to this second opinion in the Gemara, this Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, right? He'll be saying that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva are arguing about the 30 days, whether it's halacha Moshe Misinai or a Gzeres HaKasav, which will come a nafkamina if it's a suffix, according to the Rambam at least, whether there's a din l'chumra or a din l'kula. Okay.
They're all written down now. We have them there's a list of the halachos.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Where? In Yom Chazakah, I think the Rambam.
Yeah, the Rambam lists
The Rambam right there.
Yeah, he has a whole, in one of the introduction to Talmud in the back section, a list of all of the halachos.
So that's the second opinion. So the first opinion we had was the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Rav Shimon ben Levi, who basically said that Taisa Shvius is also for 30 days min ha-Torah. And why? Because of halacha Moshe Misinai. And Beis Shammai Beis Hillel came afterwards, made it takana that Rabbi Gamliel was Mavatal. Now we have the second opinion, the opinion of...
No, you're right.
Yeah, that's the first opinion. Sorry, that's the first opinion. The first opinion is whether you go with Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva, it's either halacha Moshe Misinai or Gzeres HaKasav for 30 days. It's usher, and the Bezdin was Mavatal only what came after it, which was done with a condition, a provision that a Bezdin later could be Mavatal. That's the first answer. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rabbi Gamliel, a different mahalach. Rabbi Yochanan has a separate mahalach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar that no, Rabbi Gamliel uBeizdinu midoraisa batalu, meaning he holds that really he had a Gzeres HaKasav, meaning that Eina Chanami, you want to tell me that there was a Gzeres HaKasav, or there was halacha Moshe Misina, whatever it was, that halacha Moshe Misina could very well be even longer. And they had a Bezdin Shel Rabbi Gamliel were not acting as a Bezdin. They were acting as Darshanim. They were actually Darshanim, meaning they were darshaning the pasuk. They were interpreting the pasuk. And they were interpreting the pasuk to mean that you might think there's a din of Taisa Shvius, Kamash Malan Bezdin Shel Rabbi Gamliel, that there's no din of Taisa Shvius. Now what's the drasha? My time, what's the reason? Gomer Shabbos. They learn Gzeira Shava, Shabbos from where? Shabbos Bereshis. Shabbos Bereshis just means Shabbos, what we call Shabbos. It's learned out from Shabbos. Ma laholan by Shabbos, he asur. The day is itself asur lefaneho ula akrahu mutarin, and there is no days before and days after. It's only Saturday. That's asur. All of your brains should be popping out with, what do you mean? There's a Tosfos Shabbos. There's Tosfos Shabbos before. There's Tosfos Shabbos after. We'll get to that in a minute. Tosfos over here discusses it. So too, just like Shabbos has an Isser only on that day, but the day before, the day after are mutter. Afkan Shvius. He asura, the year of Shvius is asur. Lefanah, anything before ulachra, anything after is going to be mutarin. That's how Rabbi Yochanan understands this case. Rabbi Gamliel was matir a daraisa. Why? Because he had his own understanding of the psukim, and his own understanding of the psukim meant that there is no din of Tosas Shvius min Torah.
So getting back to the second day of Pesach.
Oh, from the first answer, yeah, okay.
This is tying to the second day, bringing that.
Tziras Omer, yeah. Does a little, but not this answer, the answer before. In fact, I'm happy that you mentioned it.
Even the 30-day prohibition is on?
Yeah, he's saying there's no Tosas Shvius whatsoever. Completely mutter to work it up until the land.
And everything, and the Beisham Beisil and all those people made Zeres.
I mean, yeah, no. I mean, that's his answer. His answer is Beisham Beisil's Zera was Tosas Shvius to begin with, and Rabbi Gamliel is saying
they're wrong.
Meaning, understand it like this: there was Xeris Akasiv, 30 days. Came along Beisham and Beis Hillel, and they added a takana on that. What was their takana? Their takana was just to strengthen the deraisa. But if there's no deraisa, then the takana goes away. So it wasn't that Rabbi Gamliel was being mevatel the takana of Beisham and Beis Hillel. It's that they were being mevatel the entire din to begin with, and there's no longer a reason for Beisham and Beis Hillel's takana to exist.
Even the first 30 days are
Nothing.
So he's not using their door out saying.
Yeah, there's no provision needed. Yeah, meaning theoretically speaking, you could have done that also, but there's no reason for it. Beisham and Beis Hillel, what was their gzera? Minat Torah, it was 30 days. Came along, Beisham and Beis Hillel said even before 30 days is going to be a problem. Why were they doing that? As a siyag, we say where the rabbis are making a fence around the din Torah. Rabbi Gamliel holds that Minat Torah there's no chiyuv, so Beisham and Beis Hillel's gzera has no purpose. It was only coming to protect the Tosas Shvius. Rabbi Gamliel holds there is no Tosas Shvius to begin with.
even the first 30 days.
First 30 days, nothing. Completely mutter.
Didn't he have to have Masara from
No, it's Xeris Shava. Yes, Xeris Shava. It's Xeris Akasiv.
And they didn't hold that.
They didn't hold it. It's much like this. We're going to see there's three opinions as this is exactly what happened. The first answer clearly is that it's Halach Mishmesina or it's Xeris Akasiv, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Gamliel, who's a Tana, he can argue also. He says no. The Xeris Akasiv I have says there's no Tosas Shvius to begin with. If you'll ask Rabbi Gamliel, what are you going to do with the pasuk of the Katzir of Charish V'Katzir Tishbais? Okay, he'll darshan it either. He'll darshan it for Tziras Aimer, or he'll
He's a
say
Tana
that
that came after Beisil Beishamai?
Yeah.
And he couldn't be Mevatel their Gezerah?
he could have. He could have.
That was the whole Kash beginning. And he came in Mevatel.
So that was only working within the understanding that Rabbi Gamliel agreed that Minat Torah there's an Isser Tosas Shvius. But once I tell you there's no Isser Tosas Shvius, then the whole thing goes away. Gino's asking a very good question, which is 1 second. What's going on with are you allowed to do Superman? So the harvesting on Shabbos for the Omer was only true according to Rabbi Shmuel. So you're asking a good question. Number one, does Rabbi Akiva agree to that? And number two, are we saying that that's going to be true even in these other answers? So that is already discussed. What you're touching on is discussed in the Gedolei Achronim. The Turi Evan asked that question. There's a Rashash that says that absolutely not. That would also be a machlekes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, that whether one would be allowed to do the Ketziras Omer on Shabbos or not. Others say no, that Avada, there's no way that Rabbi Akiva would argue. In which case, then you would say the same answers you'll say for Rabbi Akiva, you'll say for Rabbi Gamliel. It's a longer conversation. The question is a good question.
On Shemitah, I guess the other thing is you're allowed to do Ksiras Omer. I guess even though it's
Ketziras Omer during Shemitah, right? I guess
also,
similar
right.
question, right? Right. And the question would be, do we extend the heter that comes from Shabbos?
right. I guess
Right. Right. That would be that's a good. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I would assume it's the same. I would assume it's the same.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
Can't pay the big bucks. Yeah. Maybe next time you'll pay for the donuts. Yeah. Okay. Zati Gemara. So that's the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan. So now the Gemara says, Maskiv lo Rav Ashi, the third answer. Rav Ashi is going to have a different explanation of what Rabbi Gamliel did. Maskiv lo Rav Ashi, Mandar Hilchasa, Asik Zera Shava, Akra Hilchasa, Mandar Kra, Asik Zera Shava, Akra Kra. He has a very interesting question. He understands that if I have a Mefurish Xeris Akasav, like Becharish V'Katzir Tishbais, or I have a Halacha Moshe Misina, which is a real Mesora that we have such a Halacha Moshe Misina, I think the Gemara is now asking what I think the rabbi was sort of subconsciously bothered by. What does this mean over here exactly? Rabbi Gamliel is coming along and saying, I have Xeris Shava, and I'm going to tell, so what's going on here? Hashem says 30 days Tosas Shvius. Yes, I agree. But I have a Xeris Shava that says maybe not. It's a little funny. It's a little strange. Meaning either like, make up your mind, so to speak. Like, is it usher? So then give me a pasuk that it's usher. It's mutter. Don't give me a pasuk that it's usher. or give me a specific pasuk that it's mutter. But what we're having over here now is there's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that it's usher, or there's exeris hakasuf that it's usher, and Rav Gamliel said, but I got a pasuk that says it's mutter. It's a little bit long-winded way to get to basically saying that there's no din of Taisa Shvius.
But you can't have a Kizera Shava on the halacha l'Moshe Messina.
That's what the Gemara is asking. That's what the Gemara is asking. Gemara is saying, Rav Ashi is saying, this doesn't make sense. You're telling me that you have Gzeira Shava, which, by the way, you can have arguments with that Gzeira Shava. That's throughout Shas, you see that. Gzeira Shava really just means the following.
Right, but it has to be in a Chumash.
No, that's something else. We have the Gzeira Shava. He's not arguing, he's not making up Gzeira Shavas on his own. There is a Gzeira Shava Shabbos to Shabbos, but there is no rule that says what you think the Gzeira Shava is what I think the Gzeira Shava is. Rav Gamliel read into Shabbos what he wanted to read in. So they're bothered. Why choose to say that Shabbos means no Tosef Shvius? Say it means something else, but not this. You have a halacha l'Moshe Sinai or exeris hakasuf mefurish pasuk, not like that. I mean, whether you're going like Rabbi Akiva or you're going like Rabbi Shmuel, it's a problem. So Rav Ashi says, therefore, I don't like this teretz. So he says a different thing. He says, let's go back to the beginning. What did we say? Rav Gamliel came along and was mevatel the gzeira of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And the Gemara was bothered. What do you mean? It's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. What was the halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Arava, Eser Netios, and what was the third thing? Nisa Chamayim, right? So you have these three things, which are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And the Gemara was bothered. How could you say that you're mevatel halacha l'Moshe Sinai? So the Gemara explained. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai told me the first 30 days. And the Gemara said that the rabbis came and added on after, and Gamliel was mevatel that. Zakti Gemara, El Amar Rav Ashi, a different mahalach. Rabban Gamliel Beis Dino Savri Lak Rabbi Shmuel. They agree with Rabbi Shmuel that it's a halach l'Moshe Sinai. So the first 30 days is halach l'Moshe Sinai, but he says, look at the halach l'Moshe Sinai. What is it included in? It's included with a rava, and more importantly, it's included with Nisa Chamayim. What's special about Nisa Chamayim? Nisa Chamayim is only negeh when there's a Beis HaMikdash. But when there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Nisa Chamayim. So too, he'll say, Tosus Shvius is only negeh when there is a Beis HaMikdash. But when there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Nisa Chamayim. And that'll be the answer for what Rabban Gamliel was saying. The Amar Hilchas Gemiri Love, V'chi Gemiri Hilchas B'zman Beis Hamikdash Kayim Dumyin Denis Chamayim. Al B'zman Ein Beis Hamikdash Kayim Lo, and that's how he explains it. Meaning that Ein Chanami, when there's a Beis Hamikdash, there's a din of Tosas Shvius for 30 days, and during that time it's halach l'Moshe Sinai. Rabban Gamliel would completely agree. The Bezdin of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel came after, they extended it. It would completely be true. There's no provisions. There's no being mevatel it. When there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's no din Tosas Shvius. And there's no reason to have Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. That's what Rabban Gamliel was coming to say. Rabban Gamliel, who lived after the Zman of the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed, was coming to say, nowadays, the din derabbanan that maybe you want to be Naik Tais Shvius, no reason to do that. You don't have to do that. Why? Because there's no longer a Beis HaMikdash. But it'll come out halach l'maisa. We paskin like this third opinion, that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, Meher b'yameinu, the halach will be that the Shvius that were Naik will even be, there'll even be a din of Tais Shvius, which will be Min HaTorah, and the din of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel will come back, the Pashtus, and we'll even have to do it from Pesach and Shavuos. That is
Taisa Shabbos deraisa.
Oh, so Taisa Shabbos. Taisa Shabbos is Min HaTorah.
The Torah. How do we do it?
It's Min HaTorah according to every Rishon, except there's a very strange opinion of the Rambam.
How do we do it?
We do it by taking. So let me ask. Let's ask and answer a question, and the question will answer your question. The Gemara says that the Gemara wants to prove that there's no Tosaf Shvius from Shabbos. How? Just like regular Shabbos, there's no Tosaf Shabbos. So too by Shabbos, by Shvius, there's no Tosaf Shvius. Asks Tosas, V'i Kasha, V'hamifkinan Mikro. We learn out from Sukkim in Masechtas Yuma, Perik Basra, that Tzorich Lasos Tosfos Kabe Shabbos, Bein B'Knisasu and Bein B'Yitziasa. We know there's a din Tosaf Shabbos. Everyone knows you have to be Mosif on Shabbos, Mosif Michol Ala Kodesh, right? So Tosfos answers a very interesting answer. He says, Ikala Meimar, Hahu Porta Lo Kachashiv. The little bit that you have to be Mosif on Shabbos is just a couple of minutes before and a couple of minutes after. And it's very possible, Tosfos says, to Leheve Ela Kol Shavu. The Ki Hahu Shiura Nami Yehe Moed Rabban Gamliel de Tzorich Lahosif. Rabban Gamliel wasn't saying that there's no Tosfos Shabbos at all. Avada there's Tosfos Shabbos, but what is it? It's a couple of minutes before, a couple of minutes after, you go to the mitzvah. So Shvius also, a couple of minutes before, a couple of minutes after, he'll be masking that Tosfos Shvius exists. But you want to tell me there's a 30-day period of Tosfos Shvius? That you have no makor for. I'll learn from Shabbos that it's only a mashu, not more. But I'm saying with that, it sort of answered your question, right? Meaning, so you see clearly Tosfos is bringing that it's an Isser Torah to have Tosfos Shabbos, because that amount is so small that it's not going to be enough that we would even affect it.
We don't consciously keep it.
Well, we do a little bit by lighting candles 18 minutes before.
We do malacha after 18 minutes.
So, unless you're really mamish pushing till Shkia,
Yeah.
Even Shkia itself, it's not so pasha. That also could be Taisa Shabbos, right? Zeis already is.
What am I going at?
I don't know.
I don't know how to keep it.
Different opinions as to what Shkia is.
I don't consciously do it.
No, we don't, and you should. I mean, it's a minat Torah. The chura mitzvah, mitzvah deraisa needs to come.
So there's no specific time or how much?
It's even
No,
kosher.
yeah, kosher. As long as you're taking it a little early, anything minat Torah. I mean, we do 18 minutes here in Eretz Yisrael, do 40 minutes, but there's different opinions.
The calendar's probably rounded off and give an extra 30
That
seconds.
could
So
be
we
also-
actually
It could be
do
we're being
it.
tricked by the calendars to do Taisa Shabbos.
Right.
Okay, Zok the Gemara Baita. Let's get back a little bit to halachas of Chalamayit. It said in the Mishnah that we are allowed to do malacha on Yantif, even though malacha, we're going to work with the assumption it's easier to explain the Gemara that the malacha on Chalamayit is asur mid'Rabbanan, even though there is a big machlokes rishonim whether it's deraisa or Rabbanan. For ease of conversation, I'm going to talk about it as a derabbanan, but just understand every time I say that it's asur mid'Rabbanan, there are shittas rishonim who say it's deraisa, but the rabbis came along and gave certain exceptions. But it's just easier to discuss it as the rabbis. Otherwise, it'll get very laborious to discuss it that way. So the Gemara says like this: the Mishnah said you're allowed to do malacha on Chalamayid when it's a davar ha'ovid, when there's a hefsid mammon. But we saw in the Mishnah that you can't do it when it's a tircha yisera, meaning you're allowed to do malacha on Chalamayid if it means you're going to lose if you don't do the malacha, but not if you're doing it in a way where you're going to have to exert so much effort that it's going to be like a bizayon to Chalamayid. You can't act, with too much effort. So Gemara said, and then where did it say that? It said avaloi mimei hakshamim umimei hakilon. Mei hakshamim means it's like a reservoir of water that you've collected from the rainwater, and a mei kilon is like a well that you have to use like a bucket to go down and get. The assumption is by a mei kilon, the Gemara is going to say like this: Bishlam a mei kilon a well ikatircha yisera. I understand why that's usher, because in order to get the water out, it requires a tremendous amount of effort. Elamei geshamim my tircha ika. The pashtus is what this means is that the way the water was collected, it was really easy to just sort of like kick it open on the bottom, and then the water would come out and provide irrigation to the field. Then you kick it back off and you can close it. So there really was not a lot of effort there. So why should that be usher? The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, two possibilities. He says, Gzeira me geshamim otu me kilon. It's a gzeira, which again, if it's a derabanan, it becomes a little complicated, but we're just going to keep it nice and simple. It's a gzeira. We're nervous that if you're going to allow someone to use the reservoir of collected rainwater, you might think, well, if that's mutter, I'll be able to use water from a well. Because really, what's the difference? The only difference between the two is the method I use to get to the water. One is using a pail, and the other one's just like kicking open the bottom. But they're both really basically collected water from the sky. So if I can use this rainwater, I can use that rainwater. So therefore, we said, blanket across the board, like a regular normal gzera derabanan, we're not going to allow you to use it. Rav Ashi, he says a little bit different. Amar me geshamim gufayu lidi me kilon also. So he says no. Not only me kilon is a problem. Water from a well is a problem because itself it's tircha yisera. But the water in a reservoir of rainwater, right now you could just kick it and the water will go. But what happens when the water goes down and then it goes down and then it goes down? And at a certain point, you want to get to that bottom water. What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to get a pail out, go in there, take out the water. That's tircha yisera, and therefore that's a problem. So really, they're more or less saying the same idea. The first opinion is that it's going to be usher, even if right now it's not a tircha yisera and it never leads to a tircha yisera because it looks like it's similar to the case of tircha yisera. And the second opinion says that no, since what you're doing could eventually lead to a tircha yisera, that's also enough of a problem. Ask the Gemara. What they're arguing in is the argument of the opinion of Reb Zeira. What did Reb Zeira say? Reb Zeira Amar Rabba Bar Yirmiyah Amar Shmuel Naharos rivers Hamoshkin Mayamin Hagamim that pull water from like lakes or ponds. These Hagamim are sort of rain comes into them, and so now you have these like sort of rivers that water from them. Mutter lahashkos mehen b'cholo shel moed. You are allowed to use that rainwater or that river water on chol moed. Meaning, we'll see in a moment what would be the question. Mar Islay Reb Zeira, meaning Reb Asi, who says, sorry, I lost this spot. Reb Ashi, who says that it's going to be that the problem with the rainwater is itself, it's going to become a tircha yisera. He holds a Reb Zeira, meaning what? Reb Zeira's whole heter is that since those waters will never deplete, therefore there's no concern that it'll ever come to a tircha yisera. So therefore Rav Ashi is going to say that it's mutter. Sorry, Rav Ashi is going to say it's also for that reason. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan, Leslie the Reb Zeira, he disagrees with the Reb Zeira, and he holds the whole reason of Reb Zeira, zeh atu zeh, And therefore, even if the situation right now is that the water will never deplete, and since it looks very similar, there's going to be a gzeira. So just spoken out loud, what we're really basically saying is, there's two opinions. Is the gzeira, I'm nervous you're going to do A because it looks similar to B, even if it can never come to B, but it looks like B? Or is a problem with A because eventually A will be B? And what would be the nafkamina between the two? Well, what happens if I have a pond that is never going to deplete because it constantly has a good source of new water? Well, if the whole reason is this looks similar, it would still be usher. But if the whole reason is because this may come to be that, well, it never will come to be that because this will never lose the water that it has in it, and therefore it's going to be mutter. And Reb Zera is the one who actually says that it's mutter to use such a pond when the pond is constantly replenishing, and therefore there's no concern that it's going to be. And so they're arguing exactly Reb Zera. The Gemara is now going to bring a gufa that's going to effectively restate what we just said, but in reverse, it's going to be the same idea. Gufa, Amar Reb Zera. Rivers that pull water from these ponds that are constantly replenishing from rainwater. Mutter lahashkos mehen b'chol shel moed. They are mutter to water a field from them on chol hamoed. And again, all of this is talking about where there is a hefsed moment, meaning if there's no hefsed moment, we saw in the Mishnah, then you can't do it, obviously, because it's malacha. We're talking here, if you don't do it, your field's going to go bad, then you have a mutter. It's a beis hashlochen, exactly. So now, Eisvei Rabbi Yirmiyah Reb Zera, we're asking a kasha Reb Zera's opinion, which is going to flesh out his opinion. What do you do with our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says you can't do what you say you can do. It says in the Mishnah very clearly you can't use the water from rain, you can't use well water, and you're effectively saying you can. He says, no, my son, honey agamim debavel, the agamim that I'm referring to, kimaya delay paskidami, it's as if the water never it depletes from them. There's constantly enough source of water, and therefore it'll be considered like it doesn't deplete, and therefore there's no concern. Now, this opinion of Reb Zera would not work with the opinion we saw above Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion was the Zera of A ought to B, even if it never will ever come to a position where you'll need to go down and do a Tirchi Yisera, since it's very similar, we make a Zera, and therefore he'll hold its Asa. Rav Ashi, who we said earlier would agree with Reb Zera, would fit with this din because he was saying that the Zera is only true when it's going to look like the situation, not if it just is similar to it. We're going to go through a bunch of cases now that are just different forms of this basic halacha of tirchi yisera. Tanu Rabbanan, hapsikos, ditches and brechos and pools, shenismalu mayim erev yontiv, that they filled up. Let's say they had a bunch of water in it, erev yontiv, and now it's cholamayim. Aser lahashkos mehen b'chol shomod, you cannot use them because of tircha, because to get to these pools and these ditches is going to require a lot of work. If there was like a, I don't know what in English is. What does it say? Amasamayim is?
Spring-fed water saddle.
Yeah, okay. It's basically like, an aqueduct is how I'm thinking of it. It like goes from one reservoir to another. It's how the water gets one place to another. But if there's a way to get water from one to the other, then it's going to be mutter, because then there's no tircha really, because the water travels on its own. That's only true when that field is already able to get most of its water from that Amas HaMayim. If it can't get most of its water from that Amas HaMayim, then you're going to create a scenario where a person's going to be nervous, I'm not going to have enough water, and I'm going to go run to find more water, which is going to require extra tircha, and therefore it's usher. Again, everything that we're going to be discussing here is will there or won't there be extra tircha, extra effort? If there's extra effort, it's a bezoin to cholamayid, you can't do it. Rav Ashi Amar, no, afal pi she'ein ruba shalosa sadasho. So even if most of the water will not be enough to water the most of the land, kivan the kamashcha ve'asya, since this type of water is constantly dripping, a person isn't going to be so nervous that I'm going to need to go run to get more water. He'll say, no. He'll say the following: Meimar Omar, Eloy Shasya Lechad Yoima, Tishil Trevet. It's trust the it's still getting water, so it should be fine. Continues the Gemara. Taner Rabbanan. Breicha shenay tefes mayim misada beis hashlachin zu. Right. Let's say you have a pool that's dripping water from one beis hashlachin, from one field. Mutter lahashkis mimena sada beis hashlachin acheres. I could then use that water on another beis hashlachin. Meaning, the chiddush over here is that even though it seems like there's a little bit of tircha, right? Breicha shenoi tefes, the water is dripping from one beis hashlachin. It's mutter for me to take that water and sort of push it to the second field. V'ha avida de paska. Sometimes it stops. You're right. If it stops dripping, and now I got to go take the water and move it over by hand manually, then it's going to be a problem with tircha. But as long as it's still dripping, it's mutter. me'ayin rishon, as long as the water is continuing to go from the first one. Fine. Tanya Reb Shimon ben Asio, if you have two fields, basically, these are vegetable or fruit fields, whatever it is, zu l'mala mizu, meaning one is higher than the other one, so getting from one to the other is not going to be simple. So the halach is lo yidla min hatachtona. You cannot take water out from the first one and take it from the bottom one to go to the top one. V'yishkes al yoina, again because of tircha. Yoiser al, not only that. Amr Belazar bar Shimon. Afilu aruga achas, even if you have one field that has parts of the field higher and parts of the field lower, chatzia namuch v'chatzia gavaya, lo yidla mimakom namuch v'yishkel mimakom gavaya, again, because going from a lower place to a higher place. Even if there's Seder, exactly. If there's no Seder, then it's completely mutter.
You need both.
If there's no Seder, it's completely usher. What we're saying here is when you have Seder and it's normally mutter, if there's Tirchi Yisera, you can't do it. Yeah. Seder means loss, meaning we're talking here about a field where if you would not irrigate it, the field would go dry and die. Meaning you need to wet it. You need to keep it irrigated. But we're not going to let you irrigate it just without any limits. If it's going to be a bizayin to yontiv, that in order to do it, there's going to be a lot of tircha. You're going to have to throw in your sweats and throw on your gloves, and you're going to have to go get down in the mud with the shovel and pick up the water. That's already too much. Tana Rabbanan, there's a bryce. Madlin liyarakis kidei la'achlan. You're allowed to water vegetables kidei la'achlan in order to eat it. So here we're jumping to a new area of halacha. Until now we've been discussing mokum hefsid. And when there's a hefsid, we say it's mutter as long as it's not a tirchi yisera. Now we're saying this is litzarech yontif. We're saying you can go ahead and do the malacha of either chorish or zareya, depending on what your opinion is, on chalamayid, as long as what you're doing is in order to eat, right? I mean, certainly on yontif I'm allowed to cook to eat, so certainly on chalamayid I'd be allowed to water the ground to go ahead and eat the food. And this is because of tzarech yontif. V'im bishvil yafusan, but if, however, all I'm doing is I'm trying to make my vegetables get fatter and nicer so I can sell them later, that's for profiting, then even if it's a hefsid, it's going to be usser because madlin is a tircha yisera, right? Ravina v'Rabba Tosfa havika azli ba'orcha. They were walking down a path. Chazalahu gavra. They saw a certain man. Dahavidali davla b'chala demuada, and they saw a certain man that was doing exactly what we just said. He was taking water out of his well, and he was using it to spritz it on the vegetables to make them, I don't know, to eat them, to do what with them. Amrle Rabba Tosfa Ravina, he said to him, Lacy Mar L'Shamti, go put that guy in Chayrim. Look what he's doing, he's being over the Rabbanim. Amrle, what do you mean? And Ravina said back to him, what do you mean? The Bryce says Mefurish, Madan Liyarakis Ketei Lachan, like we learned before, you can take water out of the well, and you can go ahead and put it on the vegetables in order to make it so that you can eat it, so that it'll be fresh to eat. Meaning it's mutal l'tzarich yontiv, even if it's a tirchi yisera. That's the chiddush here. Amrlei, and he said back to him, you think that's what the brisa means? When it says madlin liyarakis, it means that you can take water? Madlin, misabris, my madlin maya? It means you can take water out when it's a tirchi yisera? No, that can't be what it means. My madlin shlufe. It means like you're pulling vegetables. Normally when you have things growing together, if they're too overstuffed in the area, they don't grow well. So you're allowed to, what it's saying in that price is you'd be allowed to take out, you'd be allowed to uproot. Now that does not have any tirchi yisera. That's just a pull one here, a pull one here. I don't know about you, if I pull weeds, it's a tirchi yisera, but the Gemara assumes pulling these vegetables is not a tirchi yisera, but doing the water, that is a tirchi yisera, meaning Ravina and this person, this Amoira here, Rabba Tosfa, are arguing over whether when it's a tzorich yontiv, are we going to allow you to even do tirchi yisera, or does it have the same halacha of a hefsid? And here Ravina is saying, no, even if it's a tirchi yisera, if it's a tzorich yontiv for food, it's going to be mutter. That's their argument. But first, Rabba Tosfa is proving to him not like that. What's the case? Like a Mishnah in Shvius, Mishnah in Peah. Ha-meidal b'gefanim, a person, they're arguing over the word meidal. What does dali mean? Ha-meidal b'gefanim, a person has grapes. He pulls out some of the grapes. Kishem shu meidal b'shaloi. Just like I could take some out in order to make the other ones grow better, kachu meidal b'shalaniyim, I could do it with the Peah. Meaning, because it's going to be good for the aniyim, they'll have better grapes. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Meir Aimer b'shaloi rishai, I could do mine. However, ve'enu rishai b'shalaniyim, because maybe the aniyim would rather have a lot more bad grapes than having more. You know, rich people, they get to choose to have fancy grapes. But poor people, they're broke. They need to eat. They'd be willing to eat grapes that are not that good if they can have more volume of the point in the Mishnah in Peah is that you see from here that madlin doesn't necessarily mean with water. It just means you're pulling them out of the ground.
You know what Peah is?
Yeah, you have to leave over a
to
corner
leave
of your
corner
field
of
for
the field
tzedakah.
for poor people.
Thanks.
So,
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we're saying we're bringing a riot from the Mishnah. We're bringing a riot from the Mishnah that when you pull the vegetables out, there's such a concept, and that could be what the word dali means.
Not
it's
water.
the next
And not
one,
water.
Daf Yomi, it's the next,
The next, yeah.
We'll get there.
No, after brachos, the Mishnah Yomi, it's the next.
Well, you don't do it
Brachos
anymore.
Yeah, it's in the morning.
You don't do Mishnah anymore.
Huh?
Mishnah you don't do.
All right, come on. All right. We have a couple of minutes. I gotta finish that. Amr lei. So Ravina said back to him, Vahatanya, I have a separate brisa. Madlin mayim liyarakos kadei lachim. Here I have a brisa that says I can take water out of the well, and I can use water, and I can do the v'yarakos. So you see, you're clearly wrong. What that guy was doing was okay. And Ravina says it's mutter. Amr lei. So he said back to him, you know what? You're right. Tanya. If you have a brisa, you got a brisa. What am I going to do? I thought I had you. I didn't have you. I was wrong. See, that's the difference. People don't double down on their narishkeit. They found something he was wrong. So I mean, halach l'maisa, what we're coming out from our Gemara is that although hefsid, we say it's mutter to do malacha only when there's no tirchi yisera. If it's a tzarich yontiv, let's say ochel nefesh, then it'll be mutter even if it's a tirchi yisera. That's going to really be what it comes out from our Gemara. That's what Tosfos in the Tava Beater says.
Right, because it's not clear.
It's not clear.
Not clear what
Not clear.
it implies.
How's watering something to eat right away helps?
Oh, so that's
It's a very
so it could.
I thought
The mitzias is a little bit difficult there. So the mitzias, the physical mitzias. But again, I don't know. I'm not a farmer. I'm going to hide behind that and feel safe. Okay, let's just pick up a little bit. Try to see how much we could do in the next 5 minutes. It said in the Mishnah you can't make ditches under your olive trees and fill them with water. And it also said you cannot do that during, I think, Shvius. No, that's the next one. This one is just talking about during Chol Hamoed. You cannot make ditches under your olive trees. My ugyos. So I defined it as ditches, but the Gemara is bothered. Ugyos sounds like cookies. What are we talking about here? Yeah. Amr of Yehuda banki. What does it mean? It means banki. Didn't help me much. I had to look it up. Banki is ditches. We're all just throwing around the same words here. Banki is ditches. Tanyanami hachi eluheinu ugyos. What are ugyos? Bididin shebeikre zeisim. These are like ditches or furrows in the that are by the bottom of the olive trees, or by the bottom of a vine for a grapevine. Ask the Gemara, you telling me banki is what's usher? Eini v'harav Yehuda shara lebnei Bartzitza, to the people of Bartzitza, leme'evet banki lekarmei, and he said it's mutter for them to go ahead and make these ditches under their vineyards. In which case, then our Mishnah says it's usher. So how could that be? The Gemara says like kasha, ha bechadati and ha be'atiki. We're talking about the chadati when it's usher. When it's new, when you're digging the ditches, that's a tirchi yisera. Masha'ain came ba'atiki. The old ones, you're just fixing them. That's not a tirchi yisera, and therefore it's going to be mutter again, because we're talking about here where if you don't do it, these vineyards are going to go bad. It's a davra hefsed, davra ovid, and therefore it's mutter as long as it's not a tirchi yisera. The Mishnah continued and said, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah oimer einois and asa. So just very quickly, the machlekes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the Chachamim was: do we say that you're allowed to make these amos hamayim for in a field during Chol Hamoed and Shvius? So the Chachamim said you can't do it on Chol Hamoed. Rabbi Elazar says not only can you not do it on Chol Hamoed, you also can't do it during Shvius. So Bishlam Hamoed, the Gemara asks on him, he says Mishum de Katarach. That makes sense because the whole reason why it's mutter is because of the davra of it. It's a hefsed. And we said that there's a tirchi yisera, it's going to be also tirchi yisera is also. Ela Shvius, my time. Why would it be a problem during Shvius? What you're doing isn't working the land. You're literally just making an aqueduct, going from one place to another. You're not working the land. There's no problem. So he says, Pligi bar Rabbi Ava bar Mamel. Chadam ripnei shnira ke'oider. One says it's a derabanan. You're right. It's a derabanan of a gzeira. It looks like you're hoeing. That's what oder is. You're hoeing the land. Meaning by digging this thing out, it looks like you're hoeing. V'chadam ripnei shemachshir agafe l'zriya. It's because you're preparing the ground by digging out the soil, and you're having it as you make the furrow. The dirt piles up on each side. That dirt becomes nice, soft, good dirt that you could plant. They're both arguing over whether there's what the derabanan is. Is it that it's nira ke oder, or is it that it's making the ground a lot softer to plant? But regardless, there's going to be a din derabanan. My beinayu, what would be the case that would be the nafkamina between the two? What happens if, as he's building the aqueduct from one reservoir to the other, he's starting from the reservoir. So what's going to happen? As he digs, the water is going to fill the area that he's digging because it's just going to continue. And so that means as he's going, it's going to get filled with water. So therefore, if it looks like you're preparing it for planting, it's still a problem because what you're doing is still making that dirt good for planting. But if it's according to the opinion that says it looks like you're hoeing, this is not how one uses a hoe. You don't take a tool like that to make this thing in the ground and then fill it with water. That's not a normal way to do it, so therefore there's no concern. The Gemara says, I don't understand. Meaning the Gemara is basically going to say, both ideas are good ideas. Why does each one not hold of the other? So Gemara is asking, I'm sorry. Meaning, even in that scenario where the water is going, it should be usher. He says, you're right. Ella, you're right. I'll come up with another scenario that's an afkamina. What it means is, I'm taking the dirt and I'm throwing it out. So it's not going to be on the sides anymore. Because now the dirt that's soft is gone. I can't use it. There's no soft dirt there. There's no problem. But according to the opinion that holds that it's a problem of it looks like you're flattening the land, Ika. It's a problem because you're still doing it. Who cares where the dirt went? Gemara says 1 second, same question. Does it not look like you're flattening the land and you should be choshesh for the other opinion? He says no. It worked before to say that question. Now we're saying even when you're hoeing, the dirt is usually left there. By taking the dirt and pushing it off to the side, that already looks like it's enough of a difference, and therefore, since it doesn't look like hoeing, it's going to be mutter. Our Meimar Masni Labim Nation Niraka Oder. He taught the din of our Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer said, Rabbi Eliezer says it's utter by Shvias. He says that he put the reason in the Mishnah. And once he put it in the Mishnah, he holds that digging looks like hoeing, and therefore it's going to be usher. The kashrle the Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah ad the Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, because once he understood that the Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah is holding that it's always a problem digging during Shvias, Xer Derabanan, because it looks like you're using the hoe, then he says that's going to be usher. I'll find you another place where Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah says it's mutter to dig, and he doesn't have that concern. What is that scenario? Mi Amar Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah kol shnira ka'oder usher reminu. I have a brisa. Oisa the mezivloy oitzer. A person is allowed to take. What's it called?
Dung?
Yeah, but fertilizer. A person could take fertilizer and put it in his field. Rameir says it's usher until you either dig down 3 tvachim or you rise it above and check via gimel tvachim. And if he has just a little bit of fertilizer, then he can add fertilizer on top of it. Meaning, again, the issue over here is whether you're allowed to do it during Shvi'is because it looks like the fertilizer is being used to plant into, make the ground good for planting. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he says no. You have to either dig down 3 or rise it up 3 and put the fertilizer on top, or on top of a rock. What's the question? The question is, he's saying that you can take the fertilizer, dig down 3, and then put the fertilizer there, and it's mutter. How can you dig? Why isn't it a problem of nira ke'oder? Just like we said before about digging the trench for the water. So Reb Zera, Reb Ava Bar Mamel, each one had an answer, and this will cause it to do that. One is that it does not mean that he's saying you can do it now. He's saying that you did it before Shvi'is, and therefore now that you have a depth of 3 tvachim, you can go put the fertilizer there. But in a chanam you can't if you didn't do that because of the exact same concern. And the other one says no. Normally we do say you can't dig when there's no other interpretation of what you're doing. We're going to be nervous that it looks like you're using like you're hoeing. Whereas here, what we're saying is, if I'm taking the fertilizer and I'm putting it right on top, no one's going to conclude that that's what I'm doing, and therefore there's no gzera.
If you throw away the dirt, it looks like hoeing?
If you throw away no, we said that before also, that if you're throwing away the dirt, that also doesn't look like your homes. That's the whole point, meaning since there's going to be dirt there, it's going to be a problem. So I can either solve that problem by tossing the dirt away, or I can leave the dirt there, but then if I cover it with fertilizer, that's also not, no one's going to normally, I'm not a farmer, but I'm assuming when you take the tool to make the ditch, you don't then go fill it with fertilizer. You fill it with seeds, and maybe you put the fertilizer on after or something, but that won't look like hoeing, therefore there's no din derabban. So again, very interesting halachas. We're learning Hilchas Chalamayit, but somehow we're strapping them in between Hilchas Shvi'is. Hilchas Shvi'is over here. We're picking the 2 dots. Yeah.
Is yours?
A little bit of a tough one.
I think so, yeah.
You want to keep it or throw it out?
Garbage?